Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this, which is the 10th bulletin follow-up. I will share my screen so that you can see my title page, which is much the same as usual. And this is simply to note that we are going to be looking through the September 2025 bulletin. But it's not essential to have a copy by your side, since Martin's will be showing us every page. As usual, here is the picture of the front cover. This is a polyhedral dial, clearly an icosahedron in Warwickshire. And actually we'll be seeing this again because it features inside the bulletin itself. On the right, I again give my email address so that you can send me comments or grumbles. Should you wish to look at previous issues, well, you can search for the British Sundial Society YouTube and you'll find our YouTube channel. You can do that in Google. If you want to go there more directly, you simply key in the URL youtube.com/the-BSS. As usual, I have this rather abbreviated list of contents. It was a slightly thin edition, so I do encourage everybody to send in articles to a bulletin. We would love to publish them. We have the lead article by Martin Jenkins, A Tale of Two Dials, and two other substantial articles, both by Sue Manston, who I'm delighted to say is with us, about Joseph Sindel and his sundials, and Thomas Armstrong and his sundials. More about them as we go along. I will highlight the first article, since Martin has kindly agreed at the end to give us the postscript and tell us a little bit more about his folding dials, which are very curious instruments, a lot of elaborate moving parts. And that's all I have to say at this stage. So I will unshare and go back to Martin's, and he will now show us the front cover of the bulletin, which he has in electronic form by his side. Here is the front cover again, and we turn over the first two pages. The inside front cover will tell us about the front and back covers, and the right-hand side is the list of contents in the editorial, which we don't normally go into detail about. There, over the page, is the lead article. Now, as I say, Martin Jenkins is going to be giving us a long, detailed discussion about this at the end. But by all means, if anybody has any preliminary comments, do ask them. But there'll be ample opportunity to look through this article later on. Just lots and lots of these folding dials, or at least photographs of them. Yes, keep going. Right, on the right-hand side now, you can see this quarter's potpourri, this sundial, which sadly no longer exists. Well, I think the park exists. There was some discussion at the rehearsal as to whether this pedestal was so high that nobody would be able to read the sundial. My own view that if you take perspective into account, the man who is standing on the left probably is, when he gets nearer this, tall enough to look down on it, but you'll need to do a little bit of calculation to check that out. On to the next one. Next page. And this is Who was Joseph Sindel? Now, I think this article I regarded as self-contained, but Sue, do you want to say anything about this at all while your connection is working?
Yeah, why not? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I was intrigued when the Help and Advice Service was contacted about this dial. My first thought was to look if I could find a Joseph Sindel in the BSS biography of British makers, sundial makers. And there was only one reference to a Joseph Sindel, which was that picture in Figure 1, which is a sundial which is in the History of Science Museum at the University of Oxford. But we have no other information on him at all. So I was intrigued by the dial because it looks to be made with punches rather than engraved. Punches were very expensive at the time, and quite unusual. Um, sorry, did someone say something? Anyway, yeah, and there's no fixing holes in the dial, so it looks like perhaps it's never been actually put into action. Um, some of the latitude isn't quite right for the location of Tottenham Park, which is in Wiltshire, and there are various cities around the dial to show when it is noon in those places. None of them is quite correct. And in fact, Jerusalem is totally and utterly wrong because it's in the afternoon hours when it should be in the morning hours, because of course it's ahead of GMT. So we didn't think this was by any master style maker. And we were curious to find out who it was. And the chap who bought it actually lives in Ontario, in Canada. And he suggested that perhaps Joseph Sindel was an employee of this Tottenham Park estate. So I Googled Joseph Sindel and found absolutely zilch. So then I went down to my local library. And in the UK, we have local libraries can have access to ancestry.com. It's actually called a library version, which is a sort of subset from what I can make out. But it was very useful because all I did was look for Joseph Sindel at Great Bedwin, which is the location of the Tottenham Park estate. And it brought up Joseph Sindel straight away, told me all about his family, who his children were, who he married, and also I couldn't find any census information for him. And then I found out, of course, the UK censuses didn't start properly recording all the people in a household until 1841. And this dial is dated 1828. So, and in fact, Sindel died in 1839. So I looked at other documents that were on ancestry.com, including 2 marriage certificates for 2 of his children. And of course, it lists the father on a marriage certificate. And so the father was listed as Joseph Sindel, on one of them as a domestic, and on the other, he was listed as a servant. So I thought the gentleman, Randall Price, who owned the dial, was good at pointing me in this direction, and that he really was an employee on the estate. There's also a register of his death certificate, and he died in 1839 and was registered as a porter on the estate. So it looks like he was not a master craftsman, but he obviously knew something about sundialing, and was probably, had access to a set of punches and perhaps was a jack of all trades. So I actually thought finding out about this maker was a bit more interesting even than the sundial. But there you go. Any questions?
Any hands raised? That's absolutely super, Sue. It's always nice to have a little bit of, as it were, the author's voice overseeing an article.
Can I ask
Yes.
what the
Hello.
underneath was like and how the gnomon is fixed to the plate? Because it's quite nicely made. The bottom bit of the gnomon's quite nicely made.
I don't think I've got a photograph of the underneath, to be honest.
Okay.
The gnomon is overly long for the size of dial, and it's a bit bent. But yes, no, I don't believe I got a picture of the underneath, Joanna.
If you're in touch with him, could you ask him for a photo of the underneath?
I will do.
We've found some amazing things on underneaths of dials.
Yeah, of course.
Practice engraving and lots of things, which gives a lot away. Thank you.
Yes. Okay.
Usually tenons, but by no means always.
I've got a question for you, Sue. Well, not a question, a comment, really. When you refer to punches, they were expensive in their day. If he was only if you like, an enthusiast on an estate, one of the things he could have used was leather punches, because they were well known by that time for marking and establishing people's ownership in leather. So like book covers and things. So he could have used leather punches. They would have been hard enough to have used if that dial is brass.
Right, good. Yeah, quite possible. I didn't know that. Thank you.
Right, well, next one then, Martins. And here on the left, we see sculpted dial in Thessaloniki. I have to say I find this a slightly puzzling sundial. It looks as though, well, the main bit is direct east facing, or nearly so. There's another sundial which has radial lines on it. And can somebody decode this for me, please? Because if it is east facing, and that gnomon looks as though it could be parallel to the surface of the dial, which would be appropriate if it really is east facing. But then you have to explain those radial lines on the upper right hand quadrant of this square. I feel there's some unanswered questions there, and I was hoping somebody might be able to give an explanation. I see Jeff Thurston's one of us. Can you see what this is going on here, Jeff? No answer. No, I think this will have to remain a mystery, but if somebody does think afterwards, please send in a message and we'll put it into the next issue. On the right-hand page, there is, well, there's a group of, this is a book review, which we don't normally say too much about. And it's a book in German, so I don't suppose too many readers, but we have a couple of German natives looking in who are familiar with this book, no doubt. I read it from cover to cover and I enjoyed reading it, though there were some typos which degraded it slightly. But I think maybe we go on to the next article. So you have to go over the page, and here at the bottom there is an old photograph taken some years ago of a group at the conference in, when was it? 2012, so 23 years ago. Long time ago. Sadly, many of these people are no longer with us, but I am there in the bottom right, and so are one or two other people. Martin is there.
Yeah.
So on to the next page, please, where we have, yes, this one. This is another of Sue's articles. This one, I'm afraid, when I first read this, indeed when I second read it, I completely missed some of the points. So Sue is now going to tell us about these 3 new sundials and 1 old one, and put me right where I was wrong in my original guesswork. So over to you, Sue, again.
Okay. Yeah, just to clarify, there are 3 new, one dial, the top dial in figure 1 is in the BSS register, and the other 3 dials that I will talk about are, in addition, they are not in the register. They've all turned up as new, in inverted commas, new dials. We were contacted, the Help and Advice Service was contacted by a lady called Pip, who had been given a sundial by a friend. The dial belonged to the friend's mother, but they don't know where it originally came from, and that's the picture in figure 2. Right. Pip was asking for more information about her dial, which you can see on the screen now. I thought this was a beautiful dial. It's in slate, and in the 4 corners it's engraved with the maker's name, Thomas Armstrong, his profession, it says teacher, and a village called Beadnell in on the northeast coast of the UK. It's a lovely little village and tiny population with has a very sheltered beach, which is popular with holidaymakers in the summer. So I wanted to find out more about Thomas Armstrong because there was nothing in the biography, and we only have that one dial in figure 1, which is currently at a house in Whitley Bay, which is also in Northumberland. But that dial in Whitley Bay isn't at its original location. Again, we don't know where the original location was. So the first thing I did, and Frank asked me, how did I find out where the information about Thomas Armstrong? I simply asked Google. I Googled Sundial plus Thomas plus Armstrong plus Beadnell, and it came up with 2 more sundials of his on the website of Historic England, because both of these dials, one at Doxford Hall and one at Newton Hall, they are both grade 2 listed. The sundials themselves are grade 2 listed, as well as the halls, in Historic England's website. Newton Hall is only about 5 miles from Beadnell. Doxford Hall is about 6 miles from Beadnell. And Pip's document is in a village called Powburn, which is about 19 miles from Beadnell. So all of these dials are in a very, very small area, not far from Beadnell at all. The gnomons, which you can see one in figure 6 there, and also one in figure 4, they're quite unusual and they're very distinctive, and obviously by the same maker. Going back to Pip's, going back to the, figure 1, Martin's, figure 1 actually has the magnetic, it's not very easy to see, but it has the magnetic declination for that date on the dial, which is very unusual because, of course, magnetic declination's changing all the time. One of the other dials also has magnetic declination on it. That's quite unusual.
So it's written somehow or
Yeah, I
shown.
think you've got variation at the top. It's the inner circle, variation at the top.
Oh,
If you
it's
could,
so
you're
somewhere
gonna keep going round to the top of that circle.
here.
Keep going. There you go.
There
That
are
says
variations.
variation,
Okay.
and then
Yeah,
27
variation 27
degrees
degrees
westerly.
westerly.
Certainly not like that today.
No, no.
Okay.
Okay, so knowing there are 2 more dials at Doxford Hall and Newton Hall, both are stately homes, if you like, or country houses. But both of them, even though they're only about 2 miles apart, they are both hotels, spas that cater for weddings. But I thought I'll try and get photographs of their dials. I fancied going up there, but it's a 700-mile round trip for me. So the first thought was I'll ask Tony Moss if he's got any photographs. And Tony, bless him, came up with photographs of not only the Thomas Armstrong dial, but 3 other dials that we didn't know about at Doxford Hall, which are shown. Fig 7 shows a vertical dial on a wall on the house. Figure 8 shows a pillar dial in a garden next door to the house, and you can see 2 of the faces there. And then figure 9, I guess it is, Martin's, is that's a Pearson Page dial, which crops up quite often. There's a lot of those around. Pearson Page was a company who were mass producing brassware in the early 20th century, and they made a lot of sundials, which are quite good dials, quite well delineated, but they're quite common. They're not unusual, and they're not masterpieces. Even so, right. So Tony gave me the figures for the photographs for Doxford Hall. I didn't know how to get any photos for Newton Hall. So I contacted the hotel directly and asked if they could send me some photos. It must have taken me about 6 to 8 weeks to actually get the photos out of them. In the meantime, this is when I was thinking, shall I go up there myself and take photos? And then I had a brainwave and thought, I'll ask Dennis Cowan, who lives in Scotland, south of Scotland. And I thought, well, it's not that far. If he's ever this way, he could get me some photos. And as luck would have it, he got back to me and said, I was there last week for a family affair, but he wasn't going to be going again. So I just kept pestering the hotel until eventually they gave in and sent me some photographs. Right. I also, how did I find out about Thomas Armstrong? I went down the library again and used ancestry.com. I searched him. It was easy to do because there's only one Thomas Armstrong in Beadnell at that date, and he was listed as a teacher. So it was obviously the right Thomas Beadnell. I also found from Mrs. Gatty that there is a sundial in Bamborough, which is also on the northeast coast of UK, by a William Armstrong. Now, and that's in the BSS register. Both his Thomas Armstrong's father and his grandfather were called William Armstrong, and they were both alive at the time this dial in Bamborough was made in 1828. So probably this is where Thomas Armstrong learnt his sundialing skills, either from his father or his grandfather. Right, I think that's about all I've got to say about those dials. Has anybody got any questions?
I have one observation. It seems that this Newton Hall dial is wrongly positioned, suggesting by the direction of shadows, actually.
The shadow of the pedestal doesn't sort of...
Shadow of
Shadow of the pedestal, yeah.
and also on figure 10 we can see hands and mobile phone.
Yes.
This is shadow, and actually it's in the wrong direction. It could be that this sundial has been turned by 180 degrees at some
very
point
common
of time. Yeah, could be like that. Yeah.
Do you know, I spend so much time looking at the detail of the hours and what the writing's saying and that. I didn't even notice that.
But not important to you, Sue.
No, it isn't. You know, I look at the shape of the gnomon, trying to decipher, is it the same maker? Is it the same person? You know, and again, the gnomon is exactly the same as the one at Doxford and Pip's one. Yeah, you're probably right, Martins. I'll have a look what time that, if there's a timestamp on that original photograph.
Yes.
Any raised hands?
No. Looking. No raised hands so far.
Well, let's go on to the next page. Well, bottom right, there is this somewhat curious
okay, here.
straw bale sundial. That was a very temporary sundial, just for fun. It was supposed to be a fun day. It just goes to show that sundialists cannot be put down. They'll build sundials anyway, anyhow, but not a serious sundial, shall we say. On to the next page. And here over 4 pages is it, you'll see, let's leave it at that page for a moment, a number of photographs which were up at the Winchester conference. I'm not going to go through all of them. Bottom left hand corner you can see the front cover of a bulletin again, so that's where the dial came from. It was on display and it looked so good that we had it on the front cover. But the top left sundial is top left hand photograph is an amusing one to me. This is not a great artistic photograph. Can you go in closer, Martins? This is to demonstrate that this is photograph taken on the day of an equinox of a equatorial sundial. So the sun is almost in the plane of the sundial itself. And of course you won't get a shadow. That's what it says in the caption. though because of perspective, this makes it look as though the sun is hugely much bigger than the dial plate. So you would get a shadow, in fact, on both sides. The truth, of course, is that the sun really is much bigger. It's huge, but it's a very long way away. What I actually mean is that the angular diameter here appears to be much greater than that of the sundial. But of course, the angular diameter is as seen by the photographer, who is standing well back. In practice, if you're at the sundial itself, the sun probably won't shine on both sides because it's too far away. So it's a slightly unfortunate photograph. What I will do is, if I can share my screen, Martins, can you let me share? I will show you
Yes, please.
an equivalent photograph back in my, here we are. This is a photograph taken in a college garden in Cambridge, actually in Wolston College, taken by me of an armillaris fair on the day of an equinox. And in this view, we're actually getting two quite separate views of the same thing. The camera is seeing the equatorial ring from the southern side of it. So we're looking, in some sense, upwards through the hole formed by this ring. So you can see the grass through on the other side, but it is clearly a ring of some sort. Whereas you can tell by the shadow that the sun is seeing this whole ring edge on, because the shadow of that ring just appears as a long, thin black rectangle on the grass. And because of that, the sun is actually not getting through to the other side. So the inside surface, where the numbers 10, 11, 12, 1 and 2 are, is dark. It's in shadow just on this day. The day before and the day after, it would be fine. And if you look very carefully, you can see that the gnomon, the middle part of the gnomon, is itself in shadow. The sun isn't even getting as far as the gnomon because the sun is that part of the gnomon and that part of the outside ring around 12 o'clock is all in a straight line with the sun. If I show you this photograph, this is a close-up taken just a few seconds later. One of my friends, who actually at the time was the Cambridge University archivist, and she knows a lot about the early days of the university and its use of time for university lecture timetables. The university was founded in 1209, and for about the first 100 years, our lectures were timetabled using antique hours, unequal hours. But by the early 14th century, just 100 years later, we were already using equal hours. So we didn't stay on antique hours very long. Back to the photograph, she's holding up my handkerchief, which I assured her was absolutely clean, freshly laundered. And you can see the shadow of a gnomon is happily on the handkerchief, but it's not where on the inside of a ring, which is still in the dark, because it's still in shadow. And again, you can see the shadow of the gnomon itself, on the gnomon itself. So the equinox is not a good time for having sundials like this. Okay, enough of that. I will unshare and go back to Martin's. And yes, if we can go on just some, they're all there in the bulletin. I think go on to the next page. And there on the top is my second favourite one. Unfortunately, Christine Northeast, who is the de facto editor of the bulletin, is away at the moment, but she has given me some hints about this extraordinary gnomon. There is a whole lot of conflicting information about it. There's no question the gnomon really does exist, and it looks like a skeletal figure, which indeed is what it is alleged to be. Some people say it's somebody standing on a surfboard. This is very near the north coast of Cornwall. He is holding two things in his hands. In his left hand, he is holding an hourglass. Now, this is said to be the figure of death, and so symbolizing death, hourglass is a very common symbolism with death. In his right hand, he's actually holding a pair of shears for cutting, a pair of scissors, if you like. And that is supposed to be cutting off the final thread of life. So it's all very symbolic of dying. The dial plate, which you are not seeing in this photograph, has the arms of George III for no apparent reason. Lots of unexplained questions, but it's rather an amusing sundial. I think if we go on, there's not much more left in this issue of a bulletin. We don't talk about the write-up of the follow-up. It's essentially all on YouTube. And then on the back cover, there is new sundial delineated by me, made by the Cardozo Kindersley workshop. This is on a new building, new court at King's College, Cambridge, actually about a mile from the college itself. As you can tell, it's a direct east-facing, or almost direct east-facing sundial. And I'm always very nervous with a brand new sundial, which has got constant declination lines on it. On the day of a summer solstice, I'm worried that the shadow will be just inside or just outside the summer solstice line. Well, this photograph was taken at 10 o'clock, exactly 10 o'clock local sun time, and I'm delighted to see that the shadow of the gnomon, shadow of the nodus, is pretty much at the intersection of the 10 o'clock hour line and the summer solstice line. So I was a happy bunny, but this was put up about 6 months ago, but until the summer solstice, I was unsure about its how well it had been mounted. A lot of decoration there. It's a memorial to somebody who was very keen on sunflowers, hence the sundial, and all the labelled hour points are supposed to be symbolising sunflowers. Enough of that. I think now time for the postscript. So over to Martin Jenkins.
One more thing. I see Sue sent me a photo and asked.
Oh, there's the other side.
Yes. Sue, if you could comment on this.
So, Joanna, is that what you were looking for?
So, this is backside of that sundial.
Of the Joseph Sundial sundial, yeah. I mean, it doesn't tell me a lot. I couldn't see a lot on it, but then it's not a particularly high resolution photograph. But
it doesn't look as though there were tenons, does it?
No, perhaps it was never finished. You know, as I say, I don't think it was ever put into action.
Oh.
Yeah.
Suggesting that the gnomon is only pretty loose.
Yeah, maybe it may be.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. And then we could switch to our postscript presentation. Martin, please.
Okay. Good afternoon to everybody, wherever you are. I hope you've got as nice a bit of sunshine and clear blue sky as we have down here in Devon. If not, well, that's your problem. Anyway, I'd like to thank Frank for asking me, subsequent to the article in the bulletin, to give a little bit of information about how these pocket compass portable dials were assembled and used. To me, as an engineer, they're quite obvious. The two I have, the one you see on this opening slide, the one on the left is a west of London one, an inclining type, very low cost. You can find those everywhere on the internet. This one was actually given to me as a present. I'll not tell you which BSS member that was in case he's too embarrassed. The one on the right is the one I purchased, a J.H. Stewart & Sons one. Reportedly by the vendor, he thought it was probably, not specifically, but probably genuine. His reasoning was that on the base of it, as you saw in the article, there is actually a pretty good army mark punched in. But of course, as I pointed out in the article, those things can be easily copied. So when Frank asked me if I would do this postscript, what I decided to do was to take these dials outside on a bright sunny day. The date there given is the 8th of August, which was a beautiful day. Venotri, where we live, is at that latitude, 50.72 degrees, longitude west 18.3, which means that on the day, the equator time is about plus 5.5 minutes. So with a longitude correction for Venotri, that's approximately 17.5 minutes. Magnetic variation, of course, as many of you know, we're in a very unique position at the moment because magnetic variation is, to all intents and purposes here, 0. Down here at the moment, it's 0.02 degrees east. So for the purposes of a sundial at the moment, you can pretty much set one up using a magnetic compass. Right, so the west one. The first thing you have to do is to stand up the gnomon. On this one, the fixed gnomon angle is 65 degrees. Why, I do not know. Incidentally, both of these dials are clearly made in India, I think. The next move you do is to lift up the chapter ring and the gnomon to clear the latitude quadrant. And then you fold out the latitude arc. Once you've done that, you can then set the chapter ring to the latitude. Here, though, starts a few things that are wrong with it. One is that, of course, the latitude arc scale on this one, from 50 to 40 degrees latitude, it's subdivided by 6 divisions, whereas all other sectors of 10 degrees, it's subdivided by 5 divisions. Whether the person in India doesn't actually understand the protractor or not, I do not know. More important point is that the pivot center of the chapter ring is not coincident with the latitude arc pivot point. So setting exact latitude is not just difficult, but somewhat impossible. But I'll come back in a minute. It's obviously near enough. Now on the Steward dial, once you've taken it out of the box, like the top left-hand image, it's folded up. You first fold out on this one, the latitude quadrant, not the gnomon. Once you've folded out the latitude quadrant, you can set the chapter ring to the latitude. And then finally, you fold out the gnomon rod. And on the base of the gnomon rod, it's so designed on a spring clip that the indent ensures the gnomon is normal to the chapter ring, near enough. Again, as for the west type, the pivot centers of the chapter ring and the latitude arc are not coincident. So setting the correct latitudes, again, is very arbitrary and very difficult. You could actually set both of these using a good protractor, but I didn't want to do that because I wanted to do them as we would want to use them or as they were used. Right, once you've folded them out, the next object is to level the dials. Now, with regard to the Steward dial, it's got a built-in bull's nose level. Now, they're a bit of a mystery. If you look up about bullseye levels, you'll find that most information suggests that they were invented in 1939 approximately by an American. That is not correct. I found proof going back to 1710 is the earliest example I found on a beautiful portable dial in the Greenwich Museum. Also, there is one on a similar dial, which is in a private French collection in Paris of 1720. In addition, you will find bullseye dials as well, bullseye levels on instruments, geological instruments and theodolites. I found one in Sweden, which is dated, I think, 1820 or something. So you can't date or set a dial using these things. In particular, this Steward one, you can't use it because at some time, someone has refurbished it and put the glass on upside down. So the bubble never settles. So it's impossible to use. So I set the dials up using a good quality small engineer's bubble level. In both cases, I did that. The west one is slightly more difficult. I've only shown a picture there of leveling it east-west. I did it similarly for north-south, but you can only do that with the chapter ring unfolded, so you can put the dial across. But I can assure you both dials were level. So there we have the two dials set up for the latitude. You'll note that the angles of the chapter ring are different in the two dials. That's because the inclining one, the west dial, of course, you've got to take into account that the gnomon is already set at an angle. So it's a compound angle situation on that one. So they look different, but they are both correct. So we now have the two dials, Steward dial and the west dial, both correctly orientated north-south. Now, the interesting thing is the inbuilt compasses, they both work, but the Steward one is greatly inferior. It's very lightly magnetized, which means it doesn't settle. It takes ages for it to settle down. Whereas the cheaper dial, the west one, has got a pretty good compass needle in it, even though the compass face is very crude. Some of the markings are missing, you'll notice. But they both settled down, and then they were both orientating the way north-south. So I was quite happy with that. Now, once they were both set up north-south, I then put a good, well, my radio controlled wristwatch there to give accurate time, and a good orienteering compass to show you that everything was correctly set. So you'll see in that image that both dials are good north-south setting. The watch is correct. So the dials are indicating roughly 2:30. So both gnomons indicated a good shadow in strong sun. Weak sun, it's more difficult, particularly on the Steward dial. The Steward dial appears to be, well, it is made of a brass alloy, but it's darker, it's much more patinated. Now, I'm not sure whether that's natural or whether it's induced. My gut feeling is that it was treated to give it that coloration, to make it look older, I suppose. Whereas the west dial is quite clearly virgin brass sheet that has just tarnished a little. But that means that on the west dial, you can much more clearly see the shadow of the gnomon. Now, when I then compared these against the wristwatch, that's what I got. I was able to take good readings from roughly 11 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Earlier and later readings were more difficult due to variable sun. We had a little bit of cloud, it was weaker sun. Shadow readings, particularly on the Steward dial, were more problematic. But overall, I would say that using these two little dials, the concurrence is pretty good. You can use both of them for reasonably good timekeeping. I wouldn't suggest that you could use them to read better than a minute of your wristwatch, but I don't think that's what they were ever intended for anyway. So they're pretty good. You'll notice there's a little bit of variation more on the Steward one. Again, I think that's because it was more difficult to read in weaker light, weaker sunlight. I would therefore propose that if I was traveling, I would prefer the west one, even though it was lower quality. Right, so in summary, time reading on both dials, I think, is more than acceptable for what their use was. Both, I think, are fakes, as I put in the article. Time reading, I would say, is generally possible to within about 5 minutes. The cheaper west dial was my preference because it had more stable compass needle, so it was easier and quicker to orientate north-south. I think that if such types were good enough for people like Livingston and the British Army, then they're good enough for me. It's interesting that in the advert there, which is Barker's, Francis Barker and Sons of London, they were marketing one for £3.18. That was in 1907's catalogue. They state there, as used by Dr. Livingston. So I have no proof that they did supply Dr. Livingston, but of course, Barker's were well known for making compasses in particular, and they traded, mainly their business was in making sundials and compasses for other companies, other customers, and the other customers would put their name on. So when they say as used by Dr. Livingston, it could be that they supplied some other company and Dr. Livingston bought it from them. interestingly as well is that Barker's still exist today under another name. They're still in Kent in business. They supply compasses to NATO and most armed forces throughout the world. So they're quite a long, old historical company. In my one comment from our chairman, who sent me an email on the bottom there, folding dials have too many parts for his taste. Even an analytic dial's a bit dodgy in this book. Interestingly, it's a good job we didn't rely on our chairman to find Dr. Livingston. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to find. So has anybody got any questions about folding compass pocket sundials?
Yeah, I have two questions, Martin. One is, it says in the advertising blurb on the left
Yeah,
that this sundial can be used in any part of the world.
yeah,
Well, that's sort of true, but if you go into the southern hemisphere, you've got to have the thing opened out over the top, and it's starting to become complicated. So I think it's really a northern hemisphere sundial. It will go up to zero. It will go down to latitude 0
yeah.
after that. So half the world. Let's settle for that.
Yeah, well, I also think that you're quite right. I mean, that's artistic license, that drawing, clearly, because if
Yes.
you look at the latitude arc as well, it's delineated right down to 90 degrees and up to 0. Now, given that compass dip happens typically around plus 60 degrees,
Yes.
find it very difficult anyway to set the dial up correctly by compass once you are above 60 degrees latitude anyway. So I think, as with all this old advertising in olden days in the 1800s in particular, some of it is very much artistic license.
Well, my second question is a question of terminology, and I don't count myself as an engineer, and certainly not when thinking about you. You used the term bullseye bubble level. Now, to me, a bullseye level is a device which is circular and has concentric circles with a bubble being in the middle when you're right. So in other words, whereas this to me is not a bullseye level.
It is as such, but the way it was originally designed, if I could show you the glass in that, if the glass was turned up, put in the correct way, it has a slight dimple in the top. And so what you would do is position it until the bubble centers itself on the dimple. The dimple's not big enough to absorb all of the bubble, but it is enough to attract it to the center point.
So we are looking at that. What Martin, can you point?
Yeah,
that's what you're talking about.
Yes.
So that is what I call a bullseye.
Yes.
Bubble. So it's got that and two quite separate east, west, and north, south levels as well.
No, they're mine.
They're yours.
They're mine to put on to trip.
Right. I've got confused.
You can't rely on the bullseye.
No, right. The other one doesn't have a bullseye, is that right?
No.
Okay, sorry, that's my confusion. Yes, everything you say then makes sense. Yes, I confused myself. Thank you for that.
No, it's all right. There is another interesting point, Frank, from my point of view as an engineer. Some of these small compass pocket dials have no means of leveling on them, no means of truing them up for level. And I think that was because generally, if you think about it, you can actually use a magnetic compass to level things, because if the needle is fairly close to the surface of the compass, if you don't get it level, even very slightly, with a good compass, you'll find that the needle is dragging on the surface of the
Yes,
frame.
absolutely. Yes.
So you can use the needle as a pretty good guide to keeping it level or getting it level.
Yes. There's also the simple matter that if you hold it level by eye rather than by doing it properly, you'll probably get it sufficiently close that it doesn't matter. We've got the usual thing, but the sine of a small angle is 0.
That's right.
And so all the geometry stays good for 1 or 2 degrees of shift either way. You put the time out slightly, but nothing very much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, other people, please. Any other questions?
No.
Can I just say, I'm not sure I'm right here, Martin, but if you go back to the first slide, I think I thought I saw Van Ottery's longitude is out in the middle of the North Atlantic.
No, it's not.
18.3 degrees west.
That's a long way west.
Oh,
That's
sorry.
the longest,
Yeah,
right
you're
in the
right.
middle of the Atlantic.
Good for you, sir. Yeah, it should be 8.
I just you might want to change that.
Well, I remember going to a NAS conference, and the guy who looks after the register was showing one of these teardrop maps. So all the sundials that they got listed in their register, they used the Google Maps to show where every single one was. And about 10 were in the middle of the Atlantic, really were in the middle of the Atlantic. People have given completely wrong answers, wrong estimates.
So looking at that now, because when I do these things, I get sick of looking at some of this stuff when I'm putting it together.
We all do.
That should be west 3 degrees 18 minutes.
Oh, you're dyslexic. Yes, so am I. Yes.
Sorry about that.
No, we all do things like that.
I could recommend one of these little compasses, because one of the interesting things to me as well is that we do not really live our lives to a minute.
No.
And these dials are fairly small. So they're pretty, in my opinion, they're accurate enough for what they were intended for. If you were in India in the army, or you were looking for Dr. Livingstone, I would suggest that keeping time to 15 minutes would have been good enough. You hardly are going to rush to a train in India and think that you're going to get there to the minute. And likewise, anything else. I mean, it never ceases to make me laugh. Yesterday, for instance, this is digressing slightly, I had to go for my recent COVID jab, and they gave me a time to be there of 11:44. Now I thought, well, how on earth they can predict that they're going to give it me to a resolution of a minute is beyond me. And I don't think in the days of these dials, people didn't look at them that. It was a good estimate of time. So if you were in the army in India, you would tend to use that little dial, I think, to think, well, I've got 2 hours left before the sun is setting. I've got 2 hours back to get back to barracks, near enough. You didn't use it to say, well, you know, we've got to get the horses out of the stables at 5:36. I don't think that was correct. And likewise, the steward one, even instruments that we use, if you like, for more surveying type principles and things on theodolites, when you look at some of the old ones, the graduations on them are absolutely impossible to achieve on the scales, based on where you were, how long you've got to set it up, the sort of terrain and everything else. You can get a variation of several minutes on some of the scales on old theodolites, just because you can't be sure that the leveling is absolutely accurate. So they were early GPS systems as far as I can see.
Yes, modern theodolites, of course, have solid state leveling systems.
Can I come in?
So, yeah, sure.
I've got a one of these things I picked up in a market somewhere, I think quite cheaply. It's it says it's Berlin 1936, and it's got the Olympic Games insignia, 5 rings, and it's also got a mark saying Leica on it.
I know.
But is it a copy made in India? I expect so.
Probably. I can't see clearly enough from here, Julian, but I would suspect.
Yeah.
Again, I was recently contacted, his name escapes me at the moment, a gentleman in Germany who part-time looks after the collections in the, I think it's the Berlin instrument collection. And he had recently been, or the museum had been given one, and they thought it was old and genuine. But the strange thing was, this was purportedly 18 something or other, this pocket folding compass dial. But as I pointed out to him, the compass on the compass face inside, it gave the name of the compass maker, which I think was Simpson, which is obscure, and the date on it was 1941. So it was hardly likely to be a genuine pocket compass dial from the 1800s with a compass inside that was stamped 1941. Again, it was another Indian copy. Quite clearly, several other aspects of it showed it to be that. So, Julian, without seeing accurately yours, I'm no true expert on these things, but I would suspect from what you're telling me that it's another one of these Indian replicas.
Yeah, the back of it has a. So I'm trying to get the light on it. It's got the German insignia of the of the German eagle, is it? And I think they were given away at the Olympics as gifts, probably.
Yes, probably, yes.
At the Olympics in 1936.
Is the German correct?
No, it just says Berlin 1936 and Leica on the at the bottom.
Right.
I would think they were using the stamping or the notation of Leica to give it some credibility of quality.
Yes, I think that's
Leica was
I mean, there's no reason. Well, anyway, I'm sure I picked it up in the market quite cheaply, and I'm sure it came from India. But it's a very good copy.
Yep. Any more questions?
I've got a question. This is Chris Lusby Taylor. The BSS logo seems to be based on just such a dial. And I'm wondering if it's realistic in the sense that the gnomon is clearly concentric, it's in the center of the ring, whereas all of these ones you've been showing us, the gnomon is off to one side. And in fact, in many of them, the dial ring isn't even in the equatorial plane, is it?
Right. That symbol, though, that was designed by Chris Daniel, you've caught me on the hop here, but there are some excellent examples of old pocket folding dials with just that type of arrangement in museums, of course. There's one in the nice collection in the US, in the Harvard's collection. There are several. I think I've seen one in Greenwich Museum as well. But these are really old ones.
Mm-hmm.
I think of a crossbar on the logo as being a kind of inverted yoke, such as milkmaids used to have. And the real ones, which you have just been talking about, have a yoke looking exactly like that. So it's not as it were, a diagram. It is almost an accurate reproduction.
Well, it is, Frank, you're right, because that gnomon type in the BSS logo, and those very old original dials, the gnomon was actually that shape, and the crossbar part of it actually pivots in the chapter ring. So each end of that logo point, the points pivot in dimples or holes in the sides of the chapter ring.
Yes.
So pivot.
And the gnomon itself doesn't quite have parallel sides and is designed to look like an obelisk.
Yes.
Albeit a very small obelisk.
That's right. I still like it.
I like it too. Yes, there are people who think it just looks like a buckle, but I feel this is more interesting than certain other emblems that I've seen.
Well, if the dial is equatorial, that gnomon is about 3 times as tall as it needs to be.
Yes.
Oh yes. I think that's just for effect, showing off. A virility symbol.
My suggestion is to make an actual sundial based on this logo.
Yes, shouldn't be too difficult.
No.
Maybe I'll do one day.
Yes, just 2 moving parts. Right. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Martin and Martins, for both of you looking after us, and indeed to Sue for her 2 little presentations as well. All very satisfactory, I think. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
And thank you. Thank everybody.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so I think Martin's that's time to
Yeah,
end.
mhm,
So
yeah.
goodbye to everybody, and thank you for see you again in January.
Yep. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.